The furnace wasn't broken. I just needed an excuse to be awake at 2 in the morning when my wife Kara finally decided to come home from her emergency work retreat. Funny thing about emergencies, they usually don't require new lingerie and that expensive perfume she only wore for special occasions. But what did I know? I was just Tom Avery, the guy who ran a struggling steel fabrication plant and apparently didn't understand the complexities of modern corporate life. I heard her Honda Civic pull into our driveway, the engine ticking as it cooled. Through the basement window of our old Victorian house, I watched her sit in the car for a full 5 minutes, phone pressed to her ear. Even from here, I could see her smiling in that way she used to smile at me, back when we were happy, back when I thought I knew who I was married to. The front door creaked open upstairs. Kara had been promising to fix that hinge for 6 months, but somehow her busy schedule never allowed for basic home maintenance. That was my job, apparently, along with paying the mortgage, fixing the plumbing, and pretending not to notice that my wife of 8 years had become a stranger. "Tom? Are you down there?" Her voice carried that forced casualness that meant she was nervous about something. "Just checking the furnace," I called back, wiping my hands on an old rag. "Making sure we don't freeze to death while you're saving the world with quarterly reports." She appeared at the top of the basement stairs, silhouetted against the kitchen light. Even at 2 in the morning, after a supposed 3-day business trip, Kara looked perfect. Her auburn hair was styled just right, her makeup fresh. Either she'd spent the entire drive home fixing herself up, or she hadn't been doing much sleeping at this retreat. "You don't need to be sarcastic," she said, coming down the stairs. "Some of us have demanding jobs." "Right, because running a steel plant is just playing with Legos all day." I stood up, brushing dust off my jeans. "How was the retreat?" "Learn any new synergistic paradigms?" Kara's smile faltered for just a second. "It was fine. Productive. We covered a lot of ground on the Morrison account." The Morrison account. I'd heard that name a lot lately, usually in hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. Kara worked in HR for a mid-sized tech consulting firm, the kind of place where they called janitors facility management specialists and held meetings about having meetings. "Where's your phone?" I asked, noticing her empty hands. I think I left it in the car, or maybe I dropped it at the hotel. I don't know. I'm exhausted." She was fidgeting with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger, a tell I'd learned to recognize over the years. "You should go get it. Might be important work stuff. It can wait until morning." She moved past me toward the stairs, but I caught a whiff of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. Something expensive and masculine, the kind of scent that came in bottles shaped like sports cars. "I'll get it for you," I said. "I'm headed to the garage anyway." "No!" The word came out sharper than she intended. "I mean, don't worry about it. I'll get it later." But I was already walking toward the stairs, and Kara was too tired or too rattled to stop me. Outside, the October air was crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke and dying leaves. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where people still knew their neighbors' names and borrowed cups of sugar, though lately I'd noticed more sideways glances when I walked to the mailbox. Her car was unlocked, which was unlike Kara. She was obsessive about security, the type who checked the front door lock 3 times before bed. Her phone was sitting right there on the passenger seat, screen facing up, and it wasn't locked. I picked it up, telling myself I was just being helpful. The screen lit up, showing her message history. The most recent conversation was with someone named E, and it was illuminating. "Can't wait to see you again. Tom's working late at the plant, as usual. Your husband has no idea how lucky he is. He's too busy with his little factory to notice anything. Sometimes I think he loves those machines more than me. His loss is my gain. Wear that blue dress tomorrow night." I scrolled up, my stomach dropping with each message. Weeks of flirtation, planning, intimate details about their affair. And worse, jokes about me. About how oblivious I was, how boring, how she deserved better than a grease monkey with delusions of grandeur. The most recent message was time-stamped 20 minutes ago. "Thanks for an amazing weekend, E. Can't wait to do it again. Your friend Tom will never know. Your friend Tom." I stood there in my driveway, holding my wife's phone, reading about how I'd become the punchline to their favorite joke. 8 years of marriage, reduced to entertainment for my wife and her mystery lover. But who was E? I scrolled through her contacts, looking for clues. There, Ethan Brooks, listed as Consultant, Morrison Account. The same Morrison account she'd been working on so intensively lately. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to my personal account. Then I scrolled through her photos. Most were innocent, work events, lunches with friends, the usual social media fodder. But there, buried in a folder marked Work Docs, I found what I was looking for. A selfie of a man in his early 40s. handsome in that generic consultant way, wearing my old Metallica concert t-shirt. The shirt I'd been looking for all week, the one Kara claimed she hadn't seen. He was lying in a hotel bed, grinning at the camera like he'd just won the lottery. In a way, I guess he had. I forwarded the photo to myself, then carefully placed the phone back where I'd found it. My hands were surprisingly steady as I walked back to the house. Inside, Kara was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Find it?" she asked without looking at me. "Nope. Must have fallen out somewhere." I leaned against the counter, studying her face. "So tell me about this Ethan Brooks guy." The wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the tile floor. Red wine spread across the white tiles like blood. What? Who?" But her face had gone pale, and her hands were shaking. "Ethan Brooks, consultant on the Morrison account. Ring any bells?" He's just a coworker. Why are you asking about him?" "No reason. Jerry mentioned seeing you at lunch with some guy downtown. Thought it might be him?" It was a lie, but it worked. Kara's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Oh, yeah, we had a working lunch last week. Nothing exciting." "I'm sure." I grabbed a towel and started cleaning up the wine. "You should be more careful, Kara. Never know when you might cut yourself on broken glass." She stared at me for a long moment, trying to read my expression, but I'd had years of practice hiding my thoughts from her. It was a skill I'd developed during the slow death of our marriage, back when I still thought things might get better. "I'm going to bed," she said finally. "Sweet dreams," I replied, not looking up from the mess on the floor. "Dream about work." After she left, I sat at the kitchen table with a beer and my laptop, staring at the photos I'd forwarded to myself. Ethan Brooks looked like the kind of guy who drove a Tesla and used words like leverage as a verb. The kind of guy who probably made twice my salary and had never worked with his hands a day in his life. The kind of guy my wife apparently preferred to her husband. I opened a new browser window and started researching. Ethan Brooks, senior consultant at Morrison and Associates. LinkedIn profile full of corporate buzzwords and a photo that screamed, "I peaked in college." Divorced, no kids, lived in one of those expensive riverside condos that had gone up downtown. By the time I finished my research, it was almost dawn. I had a plan forming in my mind. Nothing concrete yet, just the outline of an idea. Kara and Ethan thought I was oblivious, just another dumb blue-collar husband too stupid to notice what was happening under his nose. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Turns out I was the punchline to their favorite joke, but every good joke needs a twist ending. The next morning, Kara left for work early, claiming she had to catch up on emails after her retreat. I watched from the bedroom window as she searched frantically through her car, finally finding her phone wedged between the seats where I'd carefully placed it. At the steel plant, I tried to focus on the day's work, but my mind kept drifting. Jerry Martinez, my foreman, and the closest thing I had to a best friend, noticed my distraction immediately. "You look like hell, boss," he said, joining me in the office overlooking the shop floor. "Kara keep you up all night talking about her big important business trip?" Jerry was 62, built like a fire hydrant, and had worked in steel fabrication longer than I'd been alive. He'd known Kara since we started dating, had been at our wedding, and had never particularly liked her. He was too polite to say so directly, but I caught his eye rolls when she visited the plant and talked down to the workers. Something like that. I handed him the production schedule for the week. "How are we looking on the Henderson job?" "We'll make deadline, but barely." "Could use another welder, but I know we can't afford it." He studied my face. "You want to tell me what's really eating at you?" Jerry had been married to the same woman for 38 years. They still held hands at the diner, still laughed at each other's jokes. He'd know the signs of a marriage in trouble. "Kara's having an affair." The words hung in the air between us. Jerry set down the schedule and leaned back in his chair. "You sure about that?" "Found the messages on her phone last night. Some consultant she's working with. Guy named Ethan Brooks." "Son of a bitch." Jerry's face darkened. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet. But I'm not going to just roll over and take it." "Good. You're worth 10 of her, Tom. Always have been." That afternoon, I drove to Radio Shack and bought a small GPS tracker, the kind paranoid parents use to monitor their teenagers. It was perfectly legal. The car was registered in both our names, and I had every right to know where my own vehicle was going. Installing it took less than 5 minutes. I tucked the magnetic device up under the rear bumper, then activated the tracking app on my phone. Now I'd know everywhere Kara went, in real time. The Blue Boy was the kind of dive bar that served as the unofficial town hall for our little corner of Maine. The beer was cheap, the food was greasy, and the bartender, Lila, knew everyone's business whether they wanted her to or not. I stopped by after work, needing a drink and maybe some information. Lila was wiping down glasses behind the bar, her gray hair pulled back in a ponytail that had probably been fashionable 20 years ago. "Tom Avery," she said, sliding a Budweiser across the bar without being asked. "Haven't seen you in a while. How's that pretty wife of yours?" "Busy with work. You know how it is?" Lila had a way of humming that conveyed entire conversations. "Saw her here last week, actually. Having dinner with some fancy-looking guy. Real smooth talker, expensive suit." My grip tightened on the beer bottle. "Business dinner, probably." "Probably." Another loaded hum. Though most business dinners don't end with the parties holding hands in the parking lot. I stared at her. "You saw them holding hands?" "Honey, I've been tending bar for 30 years. I've seen every kind of cheating there is. And that wasn't business." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "That wife of yours has been running her mouth around town, too, telling anyone who'll listen how she's outgrown this place, how she deserves better than being married to a factory owner." The beer turned bitter in my mouth. She said that? At Rita's book club, at the PTA meeting, at the grocery store, making you sound like some kind of caveman who doesn't appreciate her sophisticated needs. Rita was Kara's best friend, a gossipy real estate agent who treated the PTA like her personal kingdom. If Kara was bad-mouthing me to Rita, it would be all over town within a week. "Thanks for the heads up, Lila." "Just watch yourself, Tom. That girl's up to something, and it ain't good." I was finishing my beer when I heard a familiar laugh from the back booth. Male, confident, with just a hint of condescension. I turned around and saw him, Ethan Brooks, in the flesh. He was exactly what I'd expected from his photos. Mid-40s, perfectly styled hair, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than most people made in a week. He was with another man, younger, also in expensive clothes. "I'm telling you, Derek, this town is like something out of a time warp," Ethan was saying. "The locals still think the internet is a fad." Derek laughed. "And you're sure you want to stay here long term? Morrison's got other projects." "Oh, I've got my reasons for staying." Ethan's grin was predatory. "Let's just say I'm working on breaking in some of the local talent. Married talent." My vision went red for a moment. Breaking in, like Kara was a horse to be tamed. "Sounds complicated," Derek said. "The best ones always are." "But don't worry, her husband's a complete moron. Runs some little factory, thinks he's a big shot because he employs 20 people. The guy has no idea what's happening right under his nose." I stood up, every instinct telling me to walk over there and introduce myself. But that would blow my cover, and I wasn't ready for a confrontation yet. Instead, I left money on the bar and walked out, Ethan's laughter following me into the parking lot. Outside, I noticed his car immediately, a white Tesla Model S, pristine and pretentious. The kind of car that screamed, "I'm better than you," to everyone within a 50-yard radius. I walked past it, noting the license plate number. Then I had an idea. The next morning, I stopped at the hardware store and bought a tube of industrial superglue, the kind we used at the plant for emergency repairs, strong enough to bond metal permanently. That evening, I drove to Ethan's condo complex. The Tesla was parked in its assigned spot, gleaming under the parking lot lights. I looked around. No security cameras, no witnesses. Just me and the car that belonged to the man who was sleeping with my wife. I squeezed the entire tube of superglue into the charging port, then worked it around with a small screwdriver until it was completely sealed. By tomorrow morning, the glue would be harder than steel. Ethan's precious Tesla would be nothing more than an expensive paperweight. It was a small revenge, petty even. But as I drove home, I felt better than I had in weeks. The next day, Jerry found me grinning at my desk. "You look like the cat that ate the canary," he said. "Just thinking about karma," I replied. "How it has a way of catching up with people." My phone buzzed with a notification from the GPS tracker. Kara was at Ethan's condo complex, had been there for over an hour. According to her text from this morning, she was having lunch with Rita. Another lie to add to the growing pile. But two could play this game? I opened my laptop and started working on the next phase of my plan. If Kara and Ethan wanted to treat me like a fool, I'd give them exactly what they expected, right up until the moment I pulled the rug out from under them. After all, they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the dumb factory owner. That was going to cost them everything. 3 days later, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Kara, and she sounded frantic. "Tom, I need you to pick me up. My car won't start, and I'm going to be late for work." I rolled over in bed, checking the GPS tracker on my phone. Her car was at the Riverside condos, Ethan's place. She'd been there all night. "Where are you?" I asked, playing dumb. I'm at Rita's. We had wine last night, and I didn't want to drive home." Rita lived on the other side of town, nowhere near the condos. Strike two. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said. Actually, never mind. Rita can drop me off. But can you call Mike's garage and have them tow my car? I think it's the battery. Mike's garage was run by Mike Clary, whose wife Nancy was the neighborhood's unofficial surveillance system. If I had Mike tow Kara's car from the condo complex, Nancy would know about it within an hour, and the whole town would know by dinner. Sure thing, I said. I'll handle it. I called Mike and gave him the real address. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks. They didn't take long. By lunch, Jerry was shaking his head and trying not to laugh. Nancy Clary called my wife, he said. Apparently your wife's car broke down at those fancy condos downtown. Nancy's wondering what Kara was doing there, since she doesn't know anybody who lives in a place that expensive. Probably visiting a client, I said innocently. Yeah, probably. Jerry's grin suggested he wasn't buying it any more than Nancy was. That afternoon, I decided it was time to get more aggressive. I drove to Kara's office building, a glass and steel monument to corporate mediocrity. Her company, Morrison and Associates, occupied the third floor. I'd only been there a few times over the years, usually for holiday parties or company picnics. The kind of events where I stood around in my best suit, making small talk with people who clearly thought I was beneath them. The lobby directory confirmed what I already knew. Ethan Brooks, senior consultant, office 314. Right down the hall from Kara's HR department. I took the elevator up, not sure what I was planning to do. Sometimes the best reconnaissance was just showing up and seeing what happened. The third floor was all beige carpet and motivational posters. I could hear the familiar sounds of office life. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the low murmur of people who spent their days in meetings about meetings. Tom? I turned around and saw Kara walking toward me, her face a mixture of surprise and panic. She was wearing a blue dress I'd never seen before. The same blue dress Ethan had mentioned in his text messages. Hey, honey, I said, giving her a kiss on the cheek. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd surprise you. What? What are you doing here? Wanted to thank you for recommending Mike's garage. He got your car running in no time. Funny thing, though. He said it was parked at those new condos downtown. I thought you said it broke down at Rita's. Kara's face went through several color changes. It's complicated. Rita was showing me a property for her client and... Tom Avery. We both turned to see a man approaching with a confident smile and an outstretched hand. He was tall, well-dressed, and exactly what I'd expected from the photos. Ethan Brooks, he said, shaking my hand with the kind of firm grip that was supposed to establish dominance. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope. Oh, absolutely. Kara talks about you all the time. The steel business must be fascinating. There was something in his tone, a subtle condescension that made it clear he found nothing fascinating about my work. This was the man who'd called me a moron, who was breaking in my wife like she was livestock. It has its moments, I said. What about you? Consulting must be challenging. Oh, you know how it is. Helping companies optimize their human resources, streamline their processes. Very technical stuff. I'm sure. Kara's been working late a lot on your project. The Morrison account, right? Ethan's smile faltered slightly. Actually, Morrison and Associates is the company. I'm working on several accounts. Interesting. Either Kara had been lying about which project was keeping her so busy, or there was more to this than just an affair. Well, I said, I should let you two get back to work. Don't want to keep you from any important meetings. I gave Kara another kiss, this one lasting just long enough to make Ethan uncomfortable. See you at home, honey. We should have dinner together tonight. It's been too long. As I walked back to the elevator, I could hear them having a whispered argument. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was clear. They were both rattled. Good. That evening, Kara came home with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine. She was trying too hard to be normal, asking about my day, commenting on the weather, anything to avoid talking about my surprise visit. So, I said over lo mein and egg rolls, Ethan seems like a nice guy. He's fine. Just a coworker. Funny, he seemed to know a lot about me. You must talk about me more than I thought. Not really. Just normal stuff. What kind of normal stuff? Kara set down her chopsticks. Why are you being weird about this? I'm not being weird. I'm just curious about the people you work with. Is that so strange? You've never been interested in my work before. Maybe I'm trying to be a better husband. The irony of that statement hung between us. Here I was, planning my revenge against her affair, while claiming I wanted to improve our marriage. Tom, she said carefully, is everything okay? You've been acting strange lately. Strange how? I don't know. Different. Like you're watching me or something, if only she knew. I'm fine, I said, just tired. The plant's been busy. We finished dinner in relative silence, both of us pretending everything was normal. But I could see the wheels turning in Kara's head, trying to figure out what I knew and what I was planning. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in my workshop in the basement, planning my next move. I had evidence of the affair, but that wasn't enough. I wanted them to suffer the way they'd made me suffer. I wanted them to lose everything that mattered to them. Kara cared about her reputation, her standing in the community. She'd spent years building an image of herself as the perfect wife, the successful career woman who had it all together. Ethan cared about his job, his status, his expensive toys. Those would be my targets. I opened my laptop and started typing an email to Derek Morrison, Ethan's boss. I'd heard enough at the Blue Boy to know that Derek was concerned about office relationships and conflicts of interest. The email was anonymous, sent from a throwaway account, but the information was accurate. I detailed Ethan's affair with a married HR manager, the potential for harassment claims, the damage to the company's reputation if it became public. I didn't send it yet. Timing would be crucial, but the weapon was loaded and ready. My phone buzzed with another GPS notification. Kara's car was on the move, even though she was supposedly asleep upstairs. I crept up from the basement and checked our bedroom. The bed was empty, pillows arranged to look like a sleeping body in the dark. So much for subtle. Kara was getting sloppy, taking bigger risks. That meant she was getting desperate, or confident, or both. Either way, it was going to make my job easier. I went back to the basement and sent the email to Derek Morrison. Then I opened a bottle of beer and waited for my wife to come home from her midnight rendezvous. The endgame was approaching, and I was ready for it. The annual Harvest Festival was one of those small-town traditions that brought everyone together, whether they wanted to be there or not. Main Street was closed to traffic, filled with booths selling everything from homemade jam to handcrafted jewelry. There was a dunk tank, a pie-eating contest, and enough gossip to fuel the town through winter. I hadn't planned to go, but Jerry convinced me it would look suspicious if I stayed home. Besides, he said, might be interesting to see what your wife and her boyfriend do when they think nobody's watching. He was right. According to the GPS tracker, Kara had spent the morning at Ethan's condo before heading to the festival. Her story was that she was helping Rita with the PTA booth, but Rita had called me directly to ask why Kara hadn't shown up. The web of lies was getting too complicated for even Kara to manage. I found them at the beer garden, sitting at a picnic table in the corner, trying to look like casual acquaintances. Kara was wearing a sundress I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago, back when I still thought our marriage was worth saving. Ethan was in khakis and a polo shirt, the kind of carefully casual outfit that probably cost more than most people's rent. They were sitting close together, talking in low voices, Ethan's hand resting on Kara's knee under the table. I bought a beer and positioned myself where I could watch them without being obvious about it. They were completely absorbed in each other, oblivious to the dozens of people who could see them. That's when I noticed Nancy Clary at the next table over, her eyes fixed on Kara and Ethan with the intensity of a hawk watching a mouse. Nancy was the kind of woman who considered gossip a public service, and she was clearly taking mental notes. Perfect. I was about to leave when I heard Ethan's laugh, the same condescending chuckle I'd heard at the Blue Boy. He was telling some story, gesturing with his beer bottle, and I caught enough words to understand he was making fun of someone who sounded a lot like me. So this guy thinks he's some kind of industrial titan because he runs a little machine shop. 20 employees, maybe 30 on a good day. Meanwhile, his wife is dying of boredom, married to a man who thinks romance is fixing the garbage disposal. Kara giggled, actually giggled, like she was 16 instead of 32. He means well, but you're right. He has no idea what I need. Lucky for me, Ethan said, leaning closer. Though I have to say, sneaking around is getting old. When are you going to tell him? Soon, Kara said. I'm just waiting for the right moment. I want to do this cleanly, you know? No drama, right? Because publicly humiliating your husband of 8 years was the epitome of clean and drama-free. I'd heard enough. I walked over to their table, beer in hand, wearing my biggest smile. Well, I said, loud enough for Nancy and half the beer garden to hear. If it isn't my wife and her favorite coworker, mind if I join you? Kara went pale. Ethan started to stand up, but I was already pulling out a chair. Tom, Kara said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? Same as everyone else. Enjoying the festival, supporting local businesses. I took a long drink of beer, then looked directly at Ethan. So, how's that Tesla running? I heard you had some trouble with it the other day. Ethan's jaw tightened. Fine now. Just a minor electrical issue. Electrical issues can be tricky. Sometimes the simplest problems have the most complicated solutions. I was enjoying this more than I should have been. Take my marriage, for example. I thought I had a simple problem. My wife working late, being distant, acting strange. Turns out the solution was more complicated than I expected. Tom, Kara said urgently, maybe we should go home and talk. Talk? We should definitely talk. All three of us. I looked around the beer garden, noting how many people were now watching our table. In fact, why don't we talk right here? No secrets between friends, right, Ethan? I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding, Ethan said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Oh, I understand perfectly. You're the consultant who's been helping my wife with her professional development, teaching her new skills, showing her techniques she'd never experienced before. The double meaning wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. A few people at nearby tables were openly staring now. You're making a scene, Kara hissed. Am I? I thought I was just having a friendly conversation with my wife and her close colleague, the colleague she's been spending so much time with lately. Working late, weekend retreats, all those important meetings. Ethan stood up abruptly. I think I should go. Sit down, I said, and there was enough steel in my voice to make him hesitate. Eco, we're not done talking. Tom, please, Kara said, tears starting to form in her eyes. Not here. Why not here? This is where you brought him, isn't it? To our town, to meet our neighbors, to show off your new business partner. I stood up, still holding my beer, and raised my voice just enough to ensure everyone in the beer garden could hear me clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Ethan Brooks, senior consultant and homewrecker extraordinaire. He's been working very closely with my wife, Kara, helping her explore new opportunities. Isn't that right, honey? The beer garden had gone completely silent. Kara was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Ethan looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. 8 years of marriage, I continued, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space. 8 years of thinking I had a partner, someone who had my back, someone who respected our vows. Turns out I was just the opening act for the main event. That's enough, Ethan said, finally finding his voice. You're drunk. I'm perfectly sober. Sober enough to read text messages anyway. Sober enough to see hotel receipts. Sober enough to recognize my own t-shirt in someone else's selfie. Ethan's face went white. He knew exactly which selfie I was talking about. You want to know what the funny part is? I asked, looking directly at him. You thought I was too stupid to figure it out. Just another dumb factory worker who wouldn't notice his wife was screwing around with her sophisticated colleague. I finished my beer and set the empty bottle on the table with a sharp click. Well, congratulations, you got her. But here's the thing about prizes you have to steal. They're never worth as much as you think they are. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back at Kara. Oh, and honey? Don't bother coming home tonight. I'll have your things packed and ready by tomorrow. The walk back to my truck felt like the longest and shortest walk of my life. Behind me, I could hear the buzz of conversation starting up again. Dozens of voices discussing what they'd just witnessed. By tomorrow, everyone in town would know. Kara's carefully constructed image as the perfect wife would be in ruins. Ethan's reputation as a smooth professional would be a joke. It was a good start, but I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The anonymous email I'd sent to Derek Morrison worked better than I'd hoped. By Monday morning, Ethan was sitting in his boss's office trying to explain why he was having an affair with a married HR manager from his own company. I knew this because Jerry's wife, Maria, worked as a receptionist at Morrison & Associates. She'd called Jerry Sunday night with all the details. Derek was furious, Jerry told me over coffee. Apparently, there are strict policies about relationships between consultants and HR personnel, conflict of interest, potential for harassment claims, all that legal stuff. What did Ethan say? Denied everything at first. Then Derek showed him printouts of the anonymous email, along with some photos someone had taken at the festival. Hard to deny what half the town saw with their own eyes. The photos were news to me, but not surprising. In a town this size, everyone had a camera phone and an opinion about their neighbor's business. So what happens now? Derek put him on administrative leave pending a full investigation. And get this, they're bringing in an outside firm to audit all of Ethan's recent projects, make sure there wasn't any favoritism or improper influence. That was even better than I'd hoped. If they found evidence that Kara had been giving Ethan inside information or preferential treatment, she'd be fired too. Speaking of Kara, Jerry continued, Maria says she called in sick today. First time in 3 years. I wasn't surprised. After the scene at the festival, Kara had spent the night at Rita's house. She'd called me Sunday morning, crying and begging to come home so we could work things out. I'd told her the locks had been changed and hung up, Let her stay with Rita. Let Rita get tired of hosting a cheating wife and her drama. Let the whole town watch Kara's support system crumble one friend at a time. My phone rang. It was my cousin Joe, calling from Portland. "Tom, what the hell is going on down there?" I'm getting calls from half the family about some fight at the Harvest Festival. Joe was a retired Portland police detective, the kind of guy who still had contacts throughout law enforcement. If he was calling, it meant word had spread beyond our little town. "Kara's been having an affair." I called her out on it publicly. "Jesus, Tom, you okay?" "Better than okay. I'm finally done pretending everything's fine." "You need anything? Legal advice, someone to talk to?" "Actually, yeah. You still have friends in corporate security?" "A few." "Why?" "I might need someone to look into financial records, email accounts, that kind of thing. All legal, all above board." "What are you thinking?" "I think Kara and her boyfriend were doing more than just screwing around. I think they were using her position to give him advantages on company contracts." Joe was quiet for a moment. "That's a serious accusation, Tom." "I know, but if I'm right, it's not just adultery anymore. It's fraud. I'll make some calls. But Tom, be careful. If you're wrong about this, you could be looking at a lawsuit." "I'm not wrong." After Joe hung up, I sat in my office, looking out at the shop floor where my employees were building steel frameworks that would outlast all of us. Honest work, done by honest people who didn't spend their days scheming and lying. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." Ethan. Somehow he'd gotten my personal number, probably from Kara. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Blue Boy, 6 p.m., come alone." The response came immediately. "Fine." The Blue Boy was busier than usual for a Monday evening. Word about the festival had spread, and everyone wanted to be where the action was. Lila was working overtime, serving drinks, and pretending not to listen to the dozen conversations about my marriage. Ethan arrived exactly at 6, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive clothes wrinkled. The confident consultant had been replaced by a desperate man who was watching his world collapse. He slid into the booth across from me, ignoring the stares from other patrons. "You've destroyed everything," he said without preamble. "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. My career is over. Derek's talking about firing me, maybe even pressing charges." "Charges for what?" Ethan's face flushed. "You know what?" Actually, I didn't. But his reaction told me everything I needed to know. There was more to this than just an affair. "Why don't you enlighten me?" The Morrison account, the Henderson project, the municipal contracts, Kara gave me inside information on all of them. Budgets, competing bids, selection criteria. I couldn't have won those contracts without her help. There it was. Confession to conspiracy and fraud delivered right into my lap. "So you used my wife to cheat your way to success?" "It wasn't like that. We were in love. She wanted to help me succeed." "Love." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what you call it when you convince a married woman to betray her professional ethics?" "You don't understand. Kara was miserable with you. She felt trapped, unappreciated. I gave her something to live for. You gave her a way to commit career suicide. When this comes out, and it will come out, she'll never work in HR again. No one will trust her." The color drained from Ethan's face. "It doesn't have to come out. We could make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "You drop the investigation, stop spreading rumors, let this die quietly. In return, I'll end things with Kara and leave town." I pretended to consider it, taking a long drink of beer while Ethan squirmed across from me. "Tempting," I said finally, "but I've got a better idea." "What?" "You're going to confess everything to Derek Morrison. The affair, the inside information, all of it. You're going to resign quietly and pay back every penny you made from those fraudulent contracts." "That's impossible. I'd be bankrupt." "Should have thought of that before you decided to screw my wife and defraud your employer." Ethan leaned forward, desperation making his voice crack. "Please, Tom. I'm begging you. I'll do anything." "Anything?" "Yes." I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Then you'll do exactly what I just told you to do. Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows exactly what kind of man you are. You'll never work again, anywhere." I stood up, leaving money on the table for my beer. "You've got 24 hours, Ethan. After that, I start making phone calls to every consulting firm in New England." As I walked toward the door, I could hear him calling my name, but I didn't look back. I had one more stop to make before this was over. It was time to have a conversation with my wife. I found Kara at Rita's house. sitting on the front porch with a glass of wine and red-rimmed eyes. She looked up as I walked up the driveway, hope and fear warring on her face. "Tom," she said, starting to stand, "I'm so glad you came. We need to talk." "Yes, we do." Rita appeared in the doorway, her usual gossipy demeanor replaced by obvious discomfort. "I'll just go inside," she mumbled, disappearing into the house. I sat down in the chair across from Kara, studying the woman I'd been married to for 8 years. She was still beautiful, still the person I'd fallen in love with in college. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the way she was already planning her next move. "I know you're angry," she began, "and you have every right to be. But what happened at the festival was a long time coming," I finished. "The only surprise is that it took me this long to figure it out. It's not what you think, Tom. Ethan and I, it just happened. We didn't plan it. Really. Because I've seen the text messages, Kara. I've seen the photos. I know about the hotel rooms, the lies, the whole elaborate scheme you two cooked up." Her composure cracked slightly. "You went through my phone?" "Your unlocked phone that you left in the car. But that's not the important part." "Then what is?" "The important part is that you didn't just cheat on me. You committed fraud. You gave Ethan inside information to help him win contracts. That's a federal crime, Kara." The wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the porch steps. For a moment, she looked genuinely terrified. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The Morrison account, the Henderson project, the municipal contracts. Ethan already confessed, Kara. He told me everything. It was a bluff, but it worked." Kara's face went white, and I knew I'd hit the target. He what?" "Threw you under the bus to save his own skin. Claimed you seduced him, convinced him to bend the rules, made him think it was all your idea." "That's not true." "It was his idea. He said it would help us build a future together, and there was the confession I needed. So you admit it." Kara realized what she'd just said and clamped her mouth shut, but it was too late. The words were already out there, hanging between us like a death sentence for her career. "Tom, please. You have to understand. I understand perfectly. You were bored with our marriage, so you decided to destroy it. You were frustrated with your career, so you decided to destroy that too. And you were so convinced I was too stupid to notice that you got careless. I never meant for it to go this far. But it did, and now you're going to face the consequences." I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app that had been running since I sat down. "Everything you just said is documented. Your confession to conspiracy and fraud, your admission that you gave Ethan inside information, all of it. You can't use that. I'm your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and spousal privilege doesn't apply to criminal conspiracies." Kara started crying again, but this time it was different. These weren't tears of remorse or regret. They were tears of rage and frustration at being caught. "You bastard," she said. "You planned this whole thing. I learned from the best. You've been planning and scheming for months. I just got better at it faster. What do you want from me?" "Nothing." "That's the beauty of it, Kara. I don't want anything from you anymore. No apologies, no explanations, no second chances. I just want you gone." I stood up, looking down at the woman who had once been the center of my world. "Derek Morrison will probably fire you by the end of the week. The state attorney general will likely press charges within the month, and everyone in this town will know exactly what kind of person you really are. Tom, wait. No more waiting, no more lies, no more pretending." I started walking back toward my truck, then stopped and looked back one last time. "Oh, and Kara? That recording I just made? I'm sending copies to Derek Morrison, the state ethics board, and my divorce attorney, just so there's no confusion about why our marriage ended." As I drove away, I could see her in my rearview mirror, still sitting on Rita's porch, staring at the broken wine glass at her feet. 3 days later, both Kara and Ethan were fired from Morrison and Associates. The state launched an investigation into their contract fraud that would eventually result in criminal charges. Ethan left town the same day he was fired, leaving behind his Riverside condo and his Tesla, both of which were repossessed within the week. Kara tried to stay, tried to rebuild her reputation, and find another job. But in a town this size, there was no escaping what she'd done. Within a month, she'd moved back to her mother's house in Boston, her tail between her legs and her career in ruins. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. No contest, no alimony, no shared assets. Just a clean break from 8 years of lies and betrayal. I kept the house, the plant, and my self-respect. Most importantly, I kept the respect of my employees, my friends, and my community. People who had watched me get humiliated publicly saw me fight back and win. Jerry summed it up best over beers at the Blue Boy. You know what I like about you, Tom? You don't get mad, you get even. And you do it smart. 6 months later, I was sitting in that same booth when Lila brought me a beer I hadn't ordered. From the lady at the bar, she said with a grin. I looked over and saw a woman about my age, auburn hair, genuine smile, raising her own beer in a small salute. She was new in town, probably one of the teachers at the elementary school that had just opened. For the first time in years, I felt like smiling back. Sometimes the last shift really is the most satisfying, and sometimes, when you're finally off the clock, you discover there's still time for a new beginning.